All right, guys, we got Mike Ryan Ruiz of the Batard show with Stugotz on. Mike is not just a co-host, producer. I feel like you've ascended beyond producer. You're like a Hollywood executive now, going out making deals, wheeling and dealing. You're barely even on the show anymore, so I don't even know what to call you
Yeah,
nowadays.
I've been getting on the show a little bit more. Yeah, like early on when I first stepped aside. Also, part of that was intentional. It just would feel kind of weird to me if I was like, I'm no longer going to be EP, but I'm just going to chill here in the back while you guys figure it out.
Yeah,
I think that there needed to be some separation to allow people to grow. But yeah, I'm trying my best on all the other stuff, but on the show a little bit more regularly. I think like once or twice a week, I can step aside and work on all that other stuff that people will begin to see manifest hopefully in a couple of months. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Waz. We've been doing this for a while, haven't we?
of course. Listen, I love the idea of you being sort of like a helicopter producer over Chris Cody and Billy Gill and the rest of them. But the fact that you're letting these guys breathe is nice. It shows how nice of a guy you are. But I brought you up here because I wanted to talk about Jimmy Butler, the Miami Heat. They're obviously going to part ways at some point. Hopefully, for all parties involved, this is by the trade deadline. I've kind of taken the stance. I did Dominique's show yesterday, and I taken the stance that, like, look, I understand that the way Jimmy is going about this is very ugly, but if you take a macro view, the Jimmy Butler tenure has been a rousing success for the Miami Heat. And this 3 months of, sort of uncomfortable back and forth is a small price to pay, in my opinion, for what's been a wildly successful partnership. How do you feel about it, Mike?
This is his fourth marriage, and it's been his best marriage.
Yes.
But you can't tie Jimmy down like he's not cut out for marriage, and he's got a certain way of nuking those marriages. And Pat Riley has coined the phrase "the disease of me." And
Mm,
Pat Riley is a cult of personality. He is the cult in culture. He is bigger than the franchise because he basically built the foundation. It was an expansion team, but it was twisting in the wind until Pat Riley
sure.
came and gave it its identity, its motto, its entire way of being. Top down, that organization, from the players on the court, front office to the ticket takers, everyone kind of falls in line with this culture that
Mm,
was established when Pat left the New York Knicks and came to the Miami Heat. He thought he was above this. He thought he was
mm,
immune to this. And I don't really understand why, because it's already happened to him once where he lacked the self awareness, didn't realize that he was in an era of player empowerment. And it was only till LeBron put out the Sports Illustrated article saying that he was going back home did he realize that he got played. When, as word was trickling out about this meeting that he had with LeBron and his reps, and they didn't even have the decency to turn off the World Cup from the television, they made him wait. Pat was still super confident because
yeah.
he was Pat Riley. He a kingmaker, a champion, a throw rings down on the table and get everybody type of dude. And he didn't realize that he wasn't essential to a superstar's plans anymore. You would have thought he would have learned the lessons from LeBron. And by the way, I don't think Pat and the Miami Heat get nearly enough credit for. Keep in mind, these weren't free agency signings. Chris Bosh and LeBron, they were trades,
Yep, signing
that
trades.
absolutely nuke their draft capital and trade capital, and trades that they made because Bosch and LeBron said that they wanted the two additional years that they opted out of, and Miami ended up losing these players for nothing. Cleveland did not lose LeBron for nothing. They got a bunch of draft capital and trade assets from Miami. Miami had to dig themselves out of that, and there was like 2 years of James Johnson and Dion Waiters. One was kind of exciting, and they tore it down. They broke up with Dwayne Wade, and they built it back up, and they got right back to the finals. They got right back to the finals with the third core in a decade to get to the finals. That's really impressive. He does so with Jimmy Butler, who, even at the time of the acquisition, everyone was saying you still got to find a player better than Jimmy. I wasn't
Mm.
even a big Jimmy Butler guy. I wasn't crazy about the
I
signing.
remember you guys were asking Amin to talk you into why this was a good
Yeah.
signing for the Heat.
Yeah. And then he goes on this incredible run. The bubble's the bubble, right? Maybe they go on the run because of the bubble, but also I could look at that NBA finals and look at Anthony Davis being like, number one, he's healthy. Number two, he's shooting like Ray Allen.
Yeah.
This is crazy. Goran Dragic gets hurt. Bam Adebayo gets hurt. And it takes a Herculean effort from Jimmy Butler, one of the iconic images in NBA history, him literally giving it his all to force that series to six. I think everybody kind of knew that the Nuggets were much better, and the real win there was to
Beat
tell Boston
Boston.
that Boston,
Yes.
you're not good enough. And Boston did the necessary things.
Yeah.
They had to make an aggressive move because they were told thoroughly by the Miami Heat, you are not good enough. And in multiple years. You, I'm laying this as context for you, was because he should have learned from the LeBron thing, and he should have learned from what Boston did. Boston went into that offseason knowing that they had a good team, but a team that wasn't good enough. Miami had a team that was a good team, but everybody knew they weren't good enough to win a title, and that's ultimately what Pat Riley chases. He doesn't chase Eastern Conference banners and embarrassing Boston.
Sure.
That's nice. That's cool, and that'll help rationalize slow starts to the season when you realize, well, if this team gets hot, they can maybe go on a run, even though they're this historic outlier. They do one off season. Everybody in the East gets better. They stay flat. It doesn't work out. Let's not even address the disastrous Kyle Lowry signing, which was Jimmy urging them. We're just going to move past that. Second offseason comes around. They didn't get hot. Jimmy does this maintenance plan. It doesn't work out. He literally gets hurt in the play-in.
Yeah. And by the way, that wasn't some like load management. Somebody fell on his leg in that game. He got hurt.
You got to imagine, like, Pat's super uncomfortable with the load management stuff. Like,
Sure.
Pat was paying Jimmy Butler to not play in games. Jimmy insisted that this was the way. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. Even though this was Jimmy's best run, this wasn't puppy dogs and ice cream. When Kyle Lowry was here, it was bad in that locker room. It was bad between Jimmy and Tyler. Kevin Love was actually a galvanizing force in that locker room that sparked this improbable run. But Jimmy's been an agitator. Jimmy fought with Spo in ways that you've never seen any other superstars do this. He was going at Udonis. Like, Jimmy has been an agitator almost throughout his entire time down here. It just worked out that they had on-court success because Miami got the most out of Jimmy, and it was a match made in heaven, you would think, in terms of his on-court presence. But off the court, Jimmy's always been the same dude. Miami hasn't changed him. Miami's been able to navigate it because of that strong front office culture. But then the other offseason comes, and Miami, once again, they swing and miss. They try to get DeRozan. That's not big enough, by the way. We all know that. But the East gets better. They stay flat. And if they stay flat, they're going to get worse. You remember in Pat's now annual press conference to the media,
I remember this well.
issues an open challenge to Jimmy Butler. Big misstep. This is a guy that...
Did you feel like that at the time? Because at the time, I thought it was
Yes,
completely just unnecessary to do that. It felt so out of step with how management comports itself in 2024
Yes,
/ 2025. Even somebody, I don't think like even RC and Pop wouldn't come out and do this to a player that they planned on keeping in the fold. And watching Pat do that felt strange to me.
It did. It felt a little out of touch, and it felt a little bit like the disastrous one before LeBron left, where Pat is like,
oh yeah, you don't like basically duck tail and run at the first sign of difficulty.
Smiling faces, hidden agendas. He revealed that LeBron was expecting. Like it was bad. It was bad, and you would have thought that he would have learned from those missteps, but it kind of felt like, okay, this is the wrong dude to back into a corner in Jimmy Butler, knowing how things historically go sideways at the end. But Pat, once again, with that ego, thought he and this franchise were immune to it. Jimmy, if you remember, goes to the WNBA games, starts saying things like that purple and gold looks good. And then it seems like they navigated it. Silence. I'm sure that there were teams that came a knock-in, but there wasn't a deal there. And Miami stood steadfast in its resolve that Jimmy Butler would not be moved, but also would not be given the extension. Jimmy wants his money. So they enter this season, and Jimmy is emo, and Jimmy has initiated his plan to get the heck out of there. Now, the
Mm.
weird thing in all of this is he's doing this in concert with his agent, but his agent's going at Shams, who isn't wrong.
He's gotten every single thing right.
Shams broke Trump having COVID. Like, what are you doing? And then like then the Miami Heat, dude, this is the biggest misstep of them all right here. Pat, at this point, the fan base is like not even split on Jimmy. I'd say it's 60-40. Everyone understands this is not good enough. We're at the end of this run. It's time to rebuild. And let's remain competitive. Let's try to fix things with Jimmy, but if it's not going to work, we're good. We've seen this. It's a definition of insanity. Like, we're expecting different results. Our ceiling is playing. Maybe we can get hot. We were a historical outlier. Let's stop citing that. Boston is so much better. The entire East is different now. And Pat Riley puts out this like chest pounding statement like he did back in the old days when it was just like bleep Danny Ainge. And he was going at Shams and going at Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's going nowhere. And by doing that, if Jimmy wasn't backed into a corner in the offseason, totally backed in. And that is the wrong dude to back into a corner, because now you forced Jimmy Butler to take the nuclear option. And the nuclear option, what Pat didn't realize, would totally negate the maximum trade value that Jimmy might have, because Jimmy now is going to make things so ugly that every other team in the NBA knows you have zero leverage here. That was the biggest mistake.
I want to bring that up because when you didn't pay the guy, there had to have been some kind of discussion like, all right, Jimmy, play out this year and we'll see how it goes, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Jimmy was like, all right, whatever. We'll do what we have to do.
Yes, exactly like that.
And whatever, I don't know what's happened, but Jimmy's decided, you know what, I need to be out of here sooner rather than later. And I think, like you said, the leverage, like the tables have turned in such a way where it's untenable. Like the idea that you're gonna, even if you say, you know what, he gonna have to go get his money in free agency somehow, blah, 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 blah. Like, this threat it's stupid. Like, this idea that Jimmy won't pick up his $52 million contract and ruin next season too.
Yeah.
Like, we know he's willing to do that. Like, everybody knows that.
He's that petty. It is a little sad that that's his leverage. Like, well, I'll opt in. It's a little pathetic for a player.
Yes, it is.
Like, there's a good deal of shit swallowing there, that your biggest threat is like, I'll just come back at this number that is unholy. But I think I understand why it's a battle of wills. And Pat, I'm never going to be the kind of Heat fan that pushes Pat out the door. Pat can say as long as he likes.
Sure.
But this is the pitfalls of dealing with Pat Riley and the ego of Pat Riley. He didn't act in the best interests of the franchise there. He thought he was, but it wasn't self-aware. It wasn't realizing what era you're in. It's not realizing the error of your ways that I highlighted previously. This is a different cat. This is a different day and age. You as team president need to realize you need to maximize Jimmy Butler's trade value. You don't do that by backing him into a corner, because then what happens? Jimmy Butler goes to practices, curses everybody out. Remember, they suspend him with cause. The NBA PA pipes up immediately.
Of course. By the way, just so people
Pat has
know,
all the receipts.
Just so people know, these suspensions are fake. Like, Jimmy Butler is going to appeal this with the Players Association. He's going to get his money back. Don't think for a second. Yeah, he's 100%. Something like the 7-game suspension, probably 2 of those. Yeah. They'll be like, you know what? You get to keep those 2. We're taking those 2 game checks, but he's going to get the money back. The suspension is kind of like a show of force. Just be like, you know what? We have the power to do this. We'll probably have to pay you back some of this after the appeals process happens, and so what? So be it. But we have to assert some level of power here when you're, cursing coaches out and storming out of practices.
I hear you, but what do you do? I'm genuinely curious to hear your opinion on, like, as soon as the NBA PA fought on behalf of Jimmy, Miami hits him with emails and videotapes backing up their claim. NBA PA, we don't hear a peep from them. anymore.
Yeah, like I said, I think this is the kind of thing you take to the offseason, instead of fighting it into, especially if the guy's just trying to leave the team.
Mhm.
They're gonna recoup this money, but I think the Heat are doing the right thing by over punishing as to, keep this guy away while they try to work something out. But I wanted to get into some of the more, because the reason why I'm interested in this story is like this is like the two most strong-willed player and management group in the NBA.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed the sort of gossipy elements of this, where Ramona Shelburne puts out a story where the Heat are like, look, we afforded this guy special privileges. And Jimmy's like, oh, this was to go see my sick father. What do you know about the special privileges that were awarded to Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, I mean, it's awfully convenient for Jimmy to cite that. It does play on emotions. That's not what the Miami Heat are talking about. There have been plenty of players that have dealt with sick parents that have been given time. Udonis comes to mind. This is years ago, by the way, when things were presumably good between Jimmy. Like
Yeah,
a couple of reporters locally knew about it. I knew about it. Everybody respected Jimmy's space. That is not what they were talking about, and
right.
it's a bit of bad ball by Jimmy to invoke that.
Mm.
Jimmy talks to the media when he feels like. That's not something that they afforded Shaq. That's not
So
something that they
Jimmy doesn't
afforded
do
LeBron.
every single game post game.
No, no,
Wow.
no. Jimmy, like, and he's the first player in Heat franchise history to get his way there. Like I said, LeBron fell in line. Shaq didn't want to do that. Shaq fell in line.
Dude,
So
LeBron and D Wade, remember they pioneered the sort of double post game?
yeah,
They did it after every single game, dude, where this was like the biggest story in freaking sports. And they started 9-8 and all of that, and they got egg on their face. And these guys spoke every single day, dude.
every day. So that's what they're talking about. But Miami's not going to really come out and say that, though. Miami is pretty good, and I've been a willing participant, and then later, as I caught on around the Dame Lillard thing, an unwilling participant because they're really good at feeding certain people
The,
certain things
the
that just carry
propaganda.
water. Yeah, yeah. Like the culture permeates, not just beyond the franchise. There are people that fall in line. And I thought it was a bit of an embarrassing look by the Heat media to just do an about face on Jimmy Butler when some of us have been waving our arms around saying that
Yes,
this
you
is
have.
not good enough. This is not the right course of action. This team is not good enough. We can't hang our hat on an outlier run. Everybody's getting better. And, like Miami, in as awesome as it was beating Boston, and it was great. Those two runs to the finals were great in large part because Miami beat Boston on their way over there. It clouded Miami's judgment because they weren't really that good. Like, look, what are we talking about, dude? We're talking about
It
Gabe
was it was
Vincent, Max
historic
Strus.
shooting from Highsmith and Gabe
Yeah.
Vincent and Caleb Martin and Max Strus, and it was a lot of overachieving. Like, we can all recognize that.
Yeah, which includes Jimmy, by the
Duncan Robinson learned how to dribble in between
way.
this. Like, some crazy shit
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. And by the way, like it went top to bottom. Like everybody was a better version of themselves, including Jimmy. Jimmy tapped
Yeah.
into
Yeah,
look,
something else.
there were guys going on cable television saying like if you want one person to take a shot, it's Jimmy Butler. Like there were
For sure.
insane debates. Like his superstar outshined his actual ability. And he had plenty of ability, but he became one of the more recognized players in the league and he earned that. And he
Yeah.
doesn't get there without Miami. Like that's why what I said, which is this has been Jimmy Butler's best marriage, but that dude is not built for marriage. My
He's
dad,
he's a
my
rolling
dad is not built
stone.
for marriage. Like at a certain point, my dad is just going to start dadding and realize that, yeah, I don't actually want to do that. I want to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what Jimmy is. And Jimmy always wants the next best thing. And he's convinced that the best thing for his career right now is to go and play with Kevin Durant, which by the way,
I think it's
that's a
not
great
the
move.
best. That
Agreed.
I
Dog,
don't know if that's a
we
great
tried to
move.
get Kevin Durant twice. Like that
Has
would have been
playing
great.
with Kevin Durant been a great move for anybody that isn't Steph Curry and the Warriors? It doesn't feel like it, but
I,
whatever.
look, Pat's been having his lunch taken on the Kevin Durant thing 3 separate times now. And like we've said it on the show, but Miami felt pretty good about their chances. And then Ishbia comes into the league and takes their lunch, goes owner
Mm,
to owner, and
wow.
gives Brooklyn a haul. But Miami thought that they had a deal. Miami stopped short of going overboard because they were burned. by giving up all that draft capital and trade assets for LeBron and Chris Bosh. And it really took a long time, but they've accumulated these assets and they just stop short. They don't give the Godfather. The Godfather has been incapable of giving the Godfather offer and
Yeah.
overplaying his hand, overplaying it with Damian Lillard. He finally got the superstar
They
malcontent.
they were too stern on the Lillard situation in terms
Yeah,
of this is what we think he's worth. We're
yeah.
not going over that.
Well,
Ultimately, Portland did a spite deal, which
mhm.
I'll take that to my grave. That was a spite deal.
It was. It was. It was a spike deal, and quite honestly, like they they shouldn't buck up against us. I know that there's like Ringer Media, Celtics Media, and Heat Media, and they'll clash, and that's great. That's actually good fun. The
Sure.
like we like that about the rivalry. But like Celtics Media, like they should not be insulted that Miami Heat fans get so mad at how they shape that narrative. It was effective. It was hugely effective. It was the first time in one stern voice that NBA writers got fans to rally behind them and say, no, 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 no. They went to the finals with Gabe Vincent. We can't let them have Damian Lillard. And everybody fell in line. Everybody fell in line. Like that championship banner that's hanging up in TD Garden, like the Celtics media like earned part of that. It really did.
There did feel like everybody out of Boston was like, you can't take the Miami deal. It's the worst deal in the history of deals for a superstar. Tyler Hero is a G leaguer. It was out of control.
He was out of control. Miami's deal was better. There was like one working ACL in that Boston trade.
Okay, so I want to get you out of here because we've had you for a decent amount of time. How do you think this ultimately ends between Jimmy and the Heat?
Well, it's interesting because the New Orleans thing is getting traction right now, and I still think that that's like Miami's got such little leverage here that another team coming up to the plate and leaking that out. Miami historically doesn't have many leaks, so
Mm,
you see a leak like that and you wonder always. You should always ask yourself the question: Who stands to gain from this leak
right.
being there? It's Miami, so that feels like one of those strategic leaks from Miami. I ultimately think that Phoenix gets Jimmy Butler and Jimmy gets what he wants. It is interesting to see what a difficult time Phoenix has had having suitors for Bradley Beal.
I mean,
Um,
is it difficult? The guy's making 50 mil, who's gonna make another 100 the next 2 years after this one. He's got
yeah,
a no trade. That's just a horrible contract. It's
it
just a
is.
horrible proposition.
It
The
is,
Heat
but
already said no, we want no parts of Bradley Beal, rightfully so.
yeah,
And Bradley
but
Beal, to his credit, is just like, I'm not waiving my no trade clause. I
yeah,
earned that. I don't know how or why Washington decided that he did, but if that's what I understand why he's taking that stance, and it's been difficult. But I'm like the Brad Bill part to me is what makes it fascinating, and like how do they facilitate this thing
yeah.
to make this Jimmy thing work while they have this albatross still on their team.
Yeah, it was. Are we approaching the point though in Beal's contract where in the NBA it's kind of like bizarro where all of a sudden a bad deal actually has value? Or is it the two
No,
years thing?
no,
It's that bad?
it's the no trade. It's the like the idea that like I can't do anything with you
Hmm.
without your permission. Because I think Bradley Bill can still play, right? So if a team decided like, no, we'd actually like to trade for the contract, even though it's a bit onerous, but this guy's still a good player. Obviously not worth the value of the deal, but like he can contribute to winning basketball. But like if this, but like even if a team decides that, Brad Bill has to be like, oh, I'd want to live in Detroit
Yeah.
or I'd want to live in Milwaukee or whatever the case may be. And he's just like, no, I earned this. I earned the right to dictate where I get to work. I'm just fascinated to see how it goes, but I like that you think he's still going to end up in Phoenix somehow.
I think so. If I were to handicap it, I'd say Phoenix the most likely, second most likely New Orleans because
Mm.
there's some smoke there, and third most likely Memphis, just because that's where Jimmy said he doesn't want to go. Uh,
Okay. The Heat got spite dealed
yeah.
by Portland, and now they're gonna spite deal Jimmy.
Mhm.
I like the vicious cycle of the NBA.
What's weird is I
Mike,
think that's a good spot for him too. I don't know why it's
I
not a
think
bad
that I
town.
think Memphis would be excellent if they got Jimmy Butler, and
So
they have a
random.
lot of young guys that play his position. I think that would be a great deal. I think Jimmy would be a much, like, needed adult in the room over there. Even though he's a psychopath, at least, like, he takes his job seriously.
Yeah.
That would be cool. But Mike, man, thank you for coming on today. Tell the people what they should be checking out from you and the guys over there, man.
Uh, Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. We're in our 20th year now. We're
Wow.
still doing the stuff daily as most fans have appreciated and consumed.
I know I do.
And thanks, and I appreciate your support throughout the years. Hope you're enjoying the Oral History Project that comes out
Yep.
every 2 weeks. We got a new one dropping this coming Friday. Keep an eye out for God Bless Football, the Sports Podcast Award winner for Best American Football Podcast, doing
That's amazing.
all sorts of fun stuff from New Orleans. And I'll be out there with Dan Le Batard and Dan Patrick doing a live event at Tipitina's. I think some tickets are still available, so
In
give
New Orleans for the Super Bowl.
yeah, Super
Okay,
Bowl week
got you.
this coming Wednesday.
All right, man. Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Enjoy your weekend, brother.
It's great seeing you, dude.
All right, folks, that was our show for today. Make sure you subscribe to all of the Ringers YouTube pages, movies, TV, Bill Simmons, Ringer NBA, all of that. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you get notified every single time In My Feelings drops. And make sure you like this post, man. Appreciate you guys. See you next week.